Right, colleagues, it is 6 o'clock. If you could take your seats, please. Anything else outside? We'll just wait for the stragglers to make their way in. Where? Right, okay, if we could settle down, please. Good evening and welcome to this special meeting of the Council. I'll start with some domestic arrangements for the meeting. Due to the regulations surrounding voting, only those members physically present are able to vote. However, if members dialing in via Teams, I think we've got Jane Bell there, would like to contribute, please use the raise your hand function on your iPad and I'll bring you in. If you use one of the communal microphones, please use the cleaning materials provided after you've used it. Mobile devices, please ensure that all electronic equipment is either on silent mode or switched off to minimise interruption. The meeting is being live streamed during open session for members of the public to watch. And if you'd like to speak, please press your microphone to let me know, and then I'll invite you to speak when the microphone turns red. And just one final announcement. This is the first meeting for John Harrison, the Interim Director of Planning and Development. So if I could just say welcome to you. Do we have apologies for absence?
Thank you, Mayor. We have apologies from Councillor Adams, Councillor Bell, Councillor Bretherton, Councillor Higgins, Councillor Hughes, Councillor Jackson, Councillor Jones, Councillor Moon, Councillors Margaret and Phil Smith, Councillor Suthers, Councillor Trafford, Councillor Turner and Councillor Wooldridge.
Thank you. If there's anybody left, do we have any declarations of interest? If not, if we can move on to Mayor's announcements. First of all, could I thank all of those who sponsored myself and the Mayoress for completing the St Catherine's Santa Dash last weekend. We jogged around Preston Docks, I say that with a bit tongue-in-cheek, with hundreds of other Santas, children and dogs, and the weather was kind to us, which helped, and everyone had a brilliant time and raised valuable money for a very worthy cause. And there are lots of embarrassing photographs available on Facebook if you haven't seen them as yet. The next fundraiser will take place on the 18th of December at St Mary's Church in Leyland for the Leyland Band Christmas Spectacular, which is always a fantastic event to get everyone in the Christmas spirit. If you wish to purchase tickets, then please contact my secretary, Louise Bamber. Since the last full council meeting, myself and the Mayoress have been very busy. We've had a lunchtime reception to celebrate Lancashire Day at County Hall, the white ribbon flag raising ceremony here at the Civic Centre, the Leyland Cross Christmas light switch on, the official opening of the Profit Gym at Waltley Dale, the Leyland Christmas light switch on. I planted a tree in honour of White Ribbon Day in Pemberton. We visited the Galloway Society for the Blind AGM, went to the Red Rosettes Christmas concert, did the Santa Dash in Preston, went to the Mayor of Chorley's Christmas tea dance, attended a retirement Christmas party in Farrington, and today I've been to the St Catherine's Hospice, meeting some of the patients who are in there. Could I also say a huge thank you to the Deputy Mayor, Councillor Lomax, for helping juggle diary commitments and for standing in for me at various events over the past weeks, including 2 carol services at St Saviour's Church in Bamber Bridge and a pantomime by St Ambrose Players. Oh, yes, he did. So thank you, Councillor Lomax. It's much appreciated. Finally, I would like to invite you to stay behind after the meeting to join myself and the Mayoress for some festive refreshments if she gets here. She's actually been delayed. Her flight's been delayed. She's on her way back from Munich and is trying to get here. So, and it will also be a chance for you to say farewell and thank you to Gary Hall on the lead up to his retirement next week. On behalf of myself and all of the members here, May I thank Gary for all his dedicated hard work over the time he's been with us. You will be missed, Gary, and we wish you well for the future. Just to embarrass you, if I could present you with a token memento of your time here. Blimey.
Thank you. Thank you. They're opening it now.
I'm sure we'd like to see what it is. And at this point, I would invite any members who may wish to say something. Councillor Foster.
Thanks, Mayor. I know Gary doesn't like things like this, but tough because he deserves it. Professional, diligent, desperately hardworking are the three words that I'd use to describe Gary. We'd known him here in South Ribble for a number of years, if you remember, because he came across for 9 months as our interim chief finance officer, believe it or not. So he was the chief exec at Chorley. It was our chief finance officer because at the time I think we'd gone through about 4 or 5 in a period of about 18 months. And so Gary came over to assist us. And let's not beat about the bush. Gary came over to South Ribble, if you remember, as the interim chief executive, not many days after I'd been elected as leader, in a very, very difficult and challenging time for this authority. And I can't thank him enough for the work that he did behind the scenes to hold everything together. This council was not in a good place, and it wasn't through my actions or the cabinet's actions or the councillors' actions that held it together. It was through Gary Hall's actions behind the scenes, doing a wonderfully, wonderfully good job. Highly respected by everybody you always meet in local government, highly respected by the staff. And I'd like to say highly respected by the councillors as well. And, you know, you don't often see the relationship of a chief executive and a leader behind the scenes, because Gary, which is lucky, because Gary does give a lot of advice. Honestly, he gives me a lot of advice, and most of which I do. Is it good? Yeah, most of which, to be fair, is good advice as well, because it calms me down a bit. And Paul, you might not want to exactly say that in that way, right? Okay. But it's good advice. It's impartial advice. I think, to be fair, I remember when I was first elected, I used to get a bit uptight. I said, well, you're briefing too much to the Conservative group. Gary says, Paul, I'm impartial. I'm impartial in everything I do. I'm here for every single councillor, and I respect him for that as well. It's a sad day. We've got a good, new, younger chief executive taking over, but it's quite a sad day for us, because I do, when you work so closely with somebody through so many difficult times, and then for them to leave, it is a sad day for us all. Because the final thing I'll say, and it's one thing Gary deserves huge credit for, not just within South Ribble and Chorley, but the entire county of Lancashire, was the work that Gary did personally during the pandemic. He was basically the chief officer for Lancashire during the pandemic. And I think he did an absolutely wonderful job. So I hope you enjoy your retirement, Gary. It's richly deserved. And no doubt I might be on the phone to you once or twice in the New Year seeking some further advice when I do something else wrong, but never mind. But from behalf of the council, on behalf of the Labour group, can I wish you a happy retirement, but I can also say thank you very much for everything you've done for us.
Councillor Karen Walton.
Thank you, Mr. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Is it working? Right. Gary. So what qualities does a chief executive officer need to possess? A chief executive responsibilities are many and complex. You have to be optimistic, loyal, trustworthy, confident, a critical thinker, be compassionate, reliable, professional, and have a real passion for your job. CEOs must also remain humble and modest about their qualifications and achievements. Tonight, I would like to thank Gary for all his hard work as a shared CEO for South Ribble and Chorley, although we didn't vote for you at the meeting. It's not been an easy task to steer this council from 2019, but you set out on an agenda to develop this role and provide both councils with your ability to listen, guide and develop both teams to work together effectively, especially during the COVID crisis, as you said, Paul, tonight. The Conservative Group wish you every success in your plans for the future and enjoy your retirement for many years to come. Thank you, Gary.
Is there anybody else wishes to speak? In which case, on behalf of the Liberal Democrat group, if I could also wish you well for the future. Certainly, I've enjoyed the advice that you've given us over the period you've been here, and also witnessed you giving some very good advice to Councillor Foster as well, when we've had joint meetings. I hope you've got plenty lined up in your retirement, because as one of your ward councillors, I probably have rattled off a few emails to you down the years, and I'm rather hoping you're not about to get your own back. So, but wish you all the best for the future, and hope you do have a very happy retirement.
Thank you.
Which now takes us on to item 4 on the agenda, which is the Central Lancashire Local Plan Preferred Options. And if I could call upon Councillor Flannery to introduce the item.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just for consistency, and last time, are you okay if I sit down while I'm doing this? Because I've got some notes and I've got my iPad here, so thanks. And I think last time we established, if you're speaking into the mic, you can hear us a bit better over there, so I hope that's okay. So good evening, everyone, and thank you for attending tonight. The reports and accompanying information, which of it there's plenty before you tonight, seek an agreement to commence a preferred options consultation in respect of the local plan. There was 6 recommendations set out in the report. There's actually an addendum which has come round today, which is a 7th, which I'll read out at the end. The purpose of the consultation is to invite views about the emerging Central Lancashire local plan to ensure local people, stakeholders and other statutory bodies can influence the local plan and ensure it is fit for purpose to meet the local needs and aspirations. This is one of the stages of the evolution of the local plan and follows on from the earlier issues and options and a call for sites phases. This preferred options consultation will take 2 parts. Part 1, which will run from the 19th of December to 24th of February, includes details of the strategic framework for the plan, such as the vision, objectives and spatial strategy, setting out the ambition for Central Lancashire's economy, communities and environment. Now, I know people might not find that ideal, but because of the timeline we're working to, unfortunately, had to span over Christmas, but we have extended a further couple of weeks for that reason. These are the important foundations for the rest of the plan that will follow. As you know, it's a big document and a big piece of work. This consultation will also set out emerging policies, which are being referred to as policy directions and will include key strategic local policies. These will set out development needs for housing and employment and also include proposals for site allocations for housing, employment and mixed-use sites. There are also other policy themes set out, which include the economy, health, inclusive communities and the environment. Following this, in the summer of 2023, we will embark on a Part 2 preferred options consultation, which will then include all the draft policies, both strategic and for development management purposes, along with proposals for all land uses and the infrastructure required. It must be emphasised that this is not yet a full draft plan. There is much work to do, and the proposals included can and will be subject to change. We are also publishing the revised local development scheme, which is a document covering the period of December 2022 to March 2025 and sets out a timetable for production of the local plan, along with all the details of evidence we have commissioned or about to commission. So, as I just referred to earlier, in the papers you've had, you'll see the recommendations. The further recommendation is, which has been agreed, and I will, I'll read out now, actually, if that's okay. To acknowledge the publication of the written ministerial statement from the Right Honourable Michael Gove, MP, on the 6th of December 2022, regarding suggestions to make possible further changes to the local planning system, alongside the Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill. The statement does not represent a change to legislation or national policy, and therefore the Central Lancashire Councils remain committed to progressing a new local plan, recognising that as and when changes are implemented by the government, our proposed policies relating to housing need and proposals around housing supply may be required to change. It is confirmed the council will respond to any consultation on any proposals for change. Furthermore, just before I go back to the mayor, I just want to make an important point, because we had the consultation event for all members last week, and there was a particular theme running through. Just be mindful that tonight what we're going for is to agree to go out to consultation. But the numbers and the housing is always the hot topic. It's always the thing which people talk about. And whilst we all recognise that we have development, it's in around us already, the important thing is that we control development. And this consultation process is aimed at us controlling where and when and how we do development. So I just want to read out another note, please. The National Plan and Policy Framework requires the use of the standard method to calculate the need of housing unless circumstances justify an alternative. This is based on demographic trends and market signals. It makes it clear that the figure should be aspirational but deliverable. This has been the subject of discussion and agreement by the JAC and the local plan working groups throughout the time I've been involved. The standard method is therefore the starting point, so you will have seen a standard method and a number. The consultants we use to gather our evidence for the local plan started with the standard method. Then they must consider the following: housing completion trends, economic growth forecasts, total population change, population age profile change, and components of population change since 2021. In terms of scenarios of the options that are available, it was determined that the best fit for Central Lancashire was an employment-led projection broadly based on employment growth forecasts for each authority and levels of housing growth that will be required to support this. We have a real positive thing here, which sometimes interpreted as a negative. People want to come and live in South Ribble and they want to work in South Ribble. And what we've got to do is have an intelligent methodology which addresses the issues about work, what people do in work, what leisure they do, and where they live. The work gave the figure of Central Lancashire of 1,334, as opposed to the 963 using the standard method. The 1,334 is better aligned with the past completion trends and projected employment growth. Going forward, this gives a requirement for South Ribble from 2023 to 27 of 400 houses a year, 2028 to 32, 450, and then 33 to 38, 500. Just to put this into context, over the last 3 years, we've delivered in 1920, 412, 2021, 424, and 21 and 22, 513. From April to November this year, we've done 389. What that means is, if we don't control and have a plan for our development, then developers will control us, as Matthew explained to me before in a great comment. And it's a good comment, and it's a comment which is important to all of us. If we don't agree this plan and we don't agree the consultation process and we don't work together on this, what will happen is an ad hoc arrangement where developers will come in and they will put applications in areas which we don't want, and then we'll end up fighting them through the planning process, and it ends up in a uncontrolled area, whereas you've probably seen in some parts of South Ribble in the past that that's happened. So the aim tonight is for you to have read the information, for us to have a look at the recommendations, for us to agree that we go to the consultation process, and then if there's any questions outside of that, I'm happy to ask them, Mr. Mayor. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is that seconded?
Indeed, Mayor, and I reserve the right to speak later on if I may, please.
Okay, thank you. We'll now open it to debate. Anybody wishes to speak? Councillor Karen Walton.
First of all, I'd like to thank the officers for all their hard work in producing the report tonight. Unfortunately, the report was unavailable for us to consider till Wednesday last week. And this was the first time my members especially had seen the report and the figures and so I had not sufficient time to discuss the report and assess the figures. The drop-in workshop on Wednesday was an opportunity to discuss the projected areas for development in the local plan. But again, we considered too little too late. The Conservative group welcome and support the consultation process for the projected sites in the new plan and the opportunity for all our residents to make comments and have their say. But I would also ask for confirmation that the results of the consultation will be considered and the wishes of the residents listened to. And if it goes against some of the projected sites, the plan will be suitably amended. The Central Lancashire Strategic Joint Advisory Committee on the 25th of January 2022 discussed the total number of dwellings per annum which will be required for moving the new local plan forward, and this figure was 1,334 dwellings, and South Ribble will be allocated from the preferred option of 416 dwellings per annum. This figure is more than double the standard method of calculating housing needs of the 963 dwellings per annum, with South Ribble allocated 176 dwellings per annum using the standard method. This resolution was accepted by the 3 executive members of the JAC committee, and the cabinet member, Councillor James Flannery, signed this agreement without any consultation or vote by this council, so increasing the requisite number of houses from 176 dwellings to 416 dwellings per annum, so committing South Ribble to build 880 more houses in 5 years and 2,080 more houses in 15 years, resulting in 6,240 houses being built in the 15 years of the plan instead of 2,640 houses using the standard methods of calculation. But this is not the end of the story. On page 9 of the report, as Councillor Flannery has just said, we see a table of development needs calculated by a consultant with a final assumption used for the number that a 1-to-1 commuting ratio, that is, for every new job created in a district, there is a worker available to fill this, and this creates the number of 1,334 homes per annum needed across the 3 boroughs. These numbers show that South Ribble, in the Central Lancashire housing requirement, will be committed to building 400 houses per annum for the first 5 years, then 450 houses per annum for the further 5 years, and then 500 houses per annum for the next 5 years, taking us to the 15 years. So committing South Ribble to build 6,750 houses in the next 15 years. The minimum annual local housing need figure requirement for South Ribble is 181.37 houses for 2021-22, using the standard method requirement, and with 5% is 190.44 dwellings, still half the number accepted by this administration without any consultation with members or residents. The present figures may need to be adjusted slightly to encourage economic development, which we will all encourage for this borough, and to provide good homes and jobs for all our residents. There are too many reasons why we cannot accept the housing figures proposed in this report. The borough has been building above the required standard method calculation, but these are mainly historical sites which have taken some time to bring forward, so that it makes the numbers so more than they would normally be. What will happen to South Ribble if these extreme housing figures are accepted? We will be tarmacking over our green belt. The effect on thousands of extra homes being built will be enormous on our carbon footprint, with extra houses and vehicles using our roads, which are already congested, and no serious infrastructure improvements coming forward at the moment. The report for the climate change and air quality barely covers the impact of the massive number of houses that this administration has already signed up for this borough to build in the next 15 years, and really goes against the sustainability targets of the green agenda and for this borough to become net carbon zero by 2030. Where is the justification for more than doubling the number of dwellings required in this borough? This is about South Ribble and the health and well-being of all its residents. There is not enough land available in South Ribble to build almost 7,000 houses in the next 15 years unless we build on the precious green belt that provides the residents of South Ribble with such a great place to live. But this will not be true when all our green open spaces will have been built on. We will not support this tonight, and I reserve the right to speak again. Thank you.
Councillor Thilborn.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mayor. Councillor Flannery, I understand the need for economic growth, and I understand the need that we all want everybody to have a job and then be able to walk to work. It would be great. But looking through the document, if you look at page 11 and section 51, there's actually no reference to any type of carbon impact that these houses would make. So I'm going to give you two figures. The first figure is just for South Ribble alone. After 15 years of all these houses being built, once the last one's built, that year you will be putting 15.6 million tonnes of carbon into the atmosphere just through the electricity use alone. How is that sustainable growth? For the whole three boroughs, that figure goes to 187.142 million tonnes of carbon for the electricity use alone. That's just the electricity use for the houses. That does not include the destruction of the carbon sinks, the cars, the embedded carbon in the bricks, anything else. That's just the electricity use alone. So therefore, my question, how does this compare with the borough's plans for being carbon neutral by 2030? As it will be exceeding the targets you have set for the borough. That's my question, Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Mary Green.
My experience as a councillor and my having a regular contact with my residents and having a long experience with developers and developments, I'm very aware that the residents have said in previous conversations with me that we will need an increase in school places and medical facilities. The residents are always stating that doctors don't have the capacity, which they don't, and they're not assured that there will be any more available places to facilitate another 7,000 houses with school places and doctors' places in our borough. This is very concerning, and I feel that the residents, in the conversations with them, have always intimated that enough is enough in our borough, and they believe that they wouldn't support the recommendations because they're feared for this borough, the way that it's going to be just a concrete jungle. Thank you.
Councillor Paul Foster.
Thanks, Mayor. I was hoping not to have to speak tonight, but after what I've just listened to, I'm going to have to before Councillor Flannery sums up. I can't believe that we're stood here. We've got every single councillor in this chamber knows that we have to build houses for our residents to live in. Every councillor in here knows there is a chronic undersupply of housing. And every councillor knows that the Conservative government sets the targets and sets the legislation that we have to work to. And if we don't work within that framework, it is uncontrolled chaos. Bamber Bridge, Gloucester Hall, Leyland, Penwitham are already hugely overdeveloped. And that's because of the housing that the previous administration approved within the current local plan, with no infrastructure to support it. So my question is, Councillor Walton, if you're not going to support the housing numbers, and I genuinely think the Conservative group doesn't understand what you're looking at here, because Councillor Flannery made it clear the numbers that come from the government, the Conservative government. These are the numbers that we have to deliver to. So my question to you is this: if we don't build any houses in South Ribble, where are our residents going to live? It's a simple, straightforward, honest question to you all. If we don't build any houses, where do they live? I've not seen the figures until last week. That's just not true, because Councillor Phil Smith has debated at length for months now these figures. So if he might not have briefed you, Karen, but he's been acutely aware of it because he was involved in the negotiations over these numbers. He's your representative on the working group and he should be feeding this information back. Regarding Councillor Thurban, your argument's nonsensical regarding carbon footprints and electricity. South Ribble Borough Council has no control over government energy policy. If the government is burning fossil fuels to produce power, that is not our problem. We cannot do anything about that, Councillor Thurban. But what we can't do is let people freeze to death by not using electricity. They have to have power in a house. What are you suggesting? They don't turn the radiators on, they don't turn the power on, they don't turn the heating on. They have to have electricity in a dwelling. You have to. Do you agree that you have to have dwellings to live in? Do you not look at the local plan and look at the allocated sites and see that hardly any, if any at all, are on the green belt? So the argument about building on our precious green belt, where's that come from? It's just not true. Some of the sites may have to be built on the green belt because we can't build in Bamber Bridge, Lostock Hall, Farrington, Councillor Walton, or Leyland. There's no sites left. Where are your grandkids going to live? They need somewhere to live. The argument that Councillor Flannery has agreed to figures without any consultation or approval from council isn't true. He's here tonight to get the approval of council, and then they're sending it out to consultation with our public. That's what this is all about. We have to agree a package that we can communicate with our local communities. Look, let's not beat about the bush here. The government's planning policy is all over the place. We are targeted constantly as a local authority, as most local authorities are up and down this country, with appeals and the Secretary of State overturning democratic decisions on planning against the will of our communities. It happens all the time with this government. It's happening now with Pickering's Farm potentially, and I'm going to come on to that in a second. We are not in control of the planning in this borough. The government are. The government set the targets, and the government overturn constantly democratic decisions of our planning committee. It has to stop. How many times in the last 18 months, 2 years, have we seen changes to planning legislation? Yet only last week, they say, because of a Conservative fallout at Parliament, they're now going to ditch all the targets. How are we supposed to deliver a local plan when they ditch all the targets? They're going to be advisory. So where are we going to build homes? Where are we genuinely going to build homes? People deserve the right to live in a habitable house. Pickering's Farm, Mayor. I believe now there's more than enough evidence after 2 or is it 3 planning applications that have been submitted to this authority that have been turned down unanimously by all councillors to actually take that allocation out of the local plan. Unfortunately, due to the fact it's subject to a current inspection, Mayor, and a calling by the Secretary of State, we can't do that at the moment. But I wish to announce to Council, it is my intention when we are successful in that appeal and the Secretary of State's intervention, that we now have an overwhelming amount of evidence that Pickering's Farm can be taken out of the allocation, and I'll be asking that to be considered when the local plan comes back to this council for endorsement later in the year. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Michael Green.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I begin by saying there are a lot of good things in this local plan that we have before us this evening. There are some really good policies in there, and I'd like to pay my gratitude and thanks to our planning team, led by Stephen Brown. Obviously, Jonathan, while he was here, has done a tremendous amount of work on this, and all the officers that have been involved in this process. I think it's probably time just to quickly reflect on the contribution of Councillor Bill Evans as well, that he made to this process, and Councillor Flannery that's taken it on. I welcome the consultation, Mr. Mayor, and the chance for the public to have their say, because I think this is really important. Although I must say on the consultation, I'm disappointed on the list of events that there's actually only 4 in all of South Ribble. Whereas there's a great long list of venues and events in Chorley, but not in South Ribble. So I think that should be expanded if this does proceed after this evening's meeting. But my concerns are similar to those that have been expressed by colleagues, Mr. Mayor, and it's in relation to housing numbers. Regard the housing numbers, these have been consulted on. They've been consulted on with some key stakeholders. And I asked this question at the Jack meeting in September. Well, who have we consulted with? And they gave me a long list. But in that long list, at no point was there a mention of any member of the public. No members of the public have been consulted regarding the numbers. And there were 5 local housing needs methodologies out of a great long list, but there were 5 that were accepted as being reasonable by the 3 districts of South Ribble, Chorley and Preston. And these did go to the Jack meeting. And these would allow, on the figures in South Ribble, to be built anything between 176 houses per year and 416 per year. By contrast, for instance, neighbouring Chorley would have had between 350 and 529. But we've now got a figure that's coming forward in South Ribble. Not only have we gone to the highest, but we've actually increased that further. So if you look at the figures, we're looking at an average of 450 per year in South Ribble for 15 years, higher than the average one. Meanwhile, Chorley has gone down towards the lower end of 384 average per year. The recommendation before us, Mr. Mayor, is to build more than 2.5 times, more than 250% of what is required for housing needs on the standard method calculation. This has been set not by the government, it's been set by the cabinet members from South Ribble, from Preston and from Chorley. We've increased to 450 per year average. The recommendation, colleagues, let's be very clear about this, is to build 7,000 houses extra on the fields of South Ribble, which I would submit would adversely affect all our communities that we represent. The pressure upon our infrastructure would be immense. The impact upon our environment would be significant. And the recommendation is to accept this figure before the public has been consulted on this figure. And to accept it this evening and to go out to consultation then gives that weight legally in the process as it becomes a material consideration, as one of our recommendations this evening alludes to. We, colleagues, are elected to represent our communities, towns, villages, hamlets, right across South Ribble. And I would submit that the residents in those communities would not believe that it is sustainable to build a further 7,000 houses in South Ribble. It is time, in my opinion, that the public are consulted on this number before this number gains weight as part of this process for development management purposes, because otherwise we could be challenged moving forwards. For this reason, Mr. Mayor, I regret that I cannot support the recommendations this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Matthew Tomlinson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and Merry Christmas to you, and to everybody else. I have to say, what a range of contradictions we've heard this evening, because we've heard there's been no consultation with members opposite, and then we hear that Councillor Phil Smith is on the working group, and Councillor Green admits he's been at the Jack meetings himself. So the figures are out there and are well known. You know, the party opposite is calling for growth, but they don't want growth here. And of course, that's the trouble with the 46 members of Parliament who forced to climb down on the Prime Minister last week. Yes, we want growth, but we don't want it round here. We've heard about worries of carbon from a member of a political party who's just agreed to open a new coal mine. Well, doesn't try and make sense of it. You really can't. And then the final one, we want to listen to our communities. We won't allow things to go forward without listening to our communities. Oh, we're not going to talk to our communities about this. No, we don't want to show them this. If you're not going to consult, how do you back up your view that we're not going to do anything without communities' consent? Here's a document to go to public consultation. So let's consult with our communities. And if our communities have strong views on this, the commitment's in there that we'll listen. But to sit there and put your fingers in your ears and say, no, we don't want that round here, is simply not a grown-up way to go forward. It won't allow us to comply with the government's needs on planning process. It will potentially open up the floodgates to developers to come in and say, well, you've not got your local planning on time, so we're going to put an application in here and you've got nothing to say, we can't do it. So we need to be grown up about this. We need to be sensible, and we need to be consistent, and we need to have a plan in place that we can stick to. We haven't got a plan yet, but we have got something ready to go out and say to our residents, what do you think? And we need to trust our residents. Let's go out, see what they have to say, and develop a plan that we can all get behind and plan for the future. And I'll leave you with this one last fact. A house came up on Select Move in Bamber Bridge last month, a 3-bed semi, over 300 expressions of interest. And then you say, we don't want any more houses round here.
Councillor Mick Titherington.
Well, I did rise to point out the fact that Councillor Matthew Tomlinson just said, because, I mean, members' officers have referred to the fact that when they consult the public, is that they don't want houses. When you get a figure like that has just been quoted, and if you look at the Select Move, the number of bids on properties when they come up, you would say, is that what we need is houses? And the fact of the matter is, wherever you look, when we've spoken about the issues in relation to homelessness and all that, we need houses. We need houses. There are people who are crying out for houses, and we need proper houses. So I'm rather, well, I'm disappointed and surprised is that the whole debate is around the number of houses. I think we should be having a debate to say, look, we've got a problem here. We have got a problem. How do we solve it? And this document is the start of a consultation. And in answer to Councillor Mary Green, the fact of the matter is, if you're going out for consultation, if you don't listen to what comes back, then what's the point of going out to consultation? Because there are a number of things. I mean, and Councillor Thornburn, I mean, I really couldn't follow your sort of logic or figures or anything in terms of carbon. But what I do know, or carbon emissions, what I do know is that Jonathan Noel did come to the Climate Emergency Task Group and explain that, you know, within this consultation, there is a massive opportunity for us to put forward ideas on and the type of housing that we want, because, you know, it's been said before here is that we've got a major problem. When we talk about carbon emissions and being carbon neutral, that's something that we all, you know, there shouldn't be a debate about that. And so when we're talking about what type of houses we're building, what type of other buildings that are going forward, we've got to make sure that first of all they're properly insulated, that they do not you know, have high carbon emissions. So I mean, that's for us. That's for us. That's what we're here for. The council. That's what we're here for. With it's in the corporate plan and all those things that you've been mentioned over there. That in a sort of critical way, I would have thought that you would embrace the fact that where we have a document where we can where it's out for consultation and we can make grown-up contributions towards it in the interests of all our residents, not just those that are maybe in a nice, comfortable house and doing okay, but those that are looking for a house, those that are people who have been here. You know, when you talk about the desperate situation that some people are in, we've got to do something. We've got to tackle climate change. We've got to tackle the biodiversity. And that's where with the local plan, that's where we have the opportunity to make sure that we send a message out to developers when they come, that we want proper houses, we want a full recognition of our desire to be carbon neutral by 2030, and we want to protect our biodiversity. So I'm really, really saddened at the level of debate that has come from the other side on this, but it is an opportunity, and I think you should see it as that. And it would be disappointing, to say the least, if you should vote against a document going out for consultation. That's it.
Thank you. Do we have anybody else who wishes to speak? I'm sorry, Councillor Walton, you've already spoken.
Speak again.
You can't reserve the right to speak again. You're allowed to speak once. Is there anybody else who wishes to speak? Councillor Watson?
Thank you, Mayor. Apologies, I've had some bad news recently, which is why I've not been in the meeting until now, so I do apologise if I struggle a little bit with this current presentation. I've heard a number of things obviously mentioned just while I've been outside trying to bring myself together, and I've heard what's just been said by Councillors Tomlinson and Titherington. I certainly think they missed the point, especially around the environmental issues. This consultation is a material consideration. These numbers will therefore be something that will be considered and therefore more likely to be applied going forward. I appreciate that the government has currently got its own consultations and so on going on around this that may modify the figures one way or the other. However, we have a population set of figures at our own consultation that has been to the JAC meetings and so on, showed numbers in the region of around 240 for a 15-year supply based on population growth. Yes, of course, there is a need for house building, and I don't believe anyone's disputing that. I don't quite understand how anyone could come to the conclusion that we're saying anything different. What is an issue is the massive area of greenbelt that we have here in this particular wonderful South Ribble. We are unusual in that it is such a high percentage. There's a very good reason for that, because we are south of the Ribble. And this gives enormous stretches of land that are, of course, floodland and so on, and that mean that our fields are incredibly rich and verdant. There is a massive growing potential, which is clearly being used by the agricultural industry at a time, especially when we've got problems around supply of food and so on that has seen prices soar. The thought of tarmacking over vast swathes of agricultural land is frankly, environmentally illiterate. The carbon impact of doing that alone, let alone the sequestration that we lose, it's just almost staggering to believe that we would want to go to a point where we are destroying this land and not allowing it to be used going forward when we clearly need food security, when we clearly have to have as much of our agricultural land producing at as high a capacity as possible. We can't do that if it's covered in houses. Unfortunately, at some point, there is going to become a stage where we do max out on the number of houses that can be built in an area. That has to be dealt with at that particular time. But at the moment, we do not need to be building that level of housing when we have targets of 2030 in order to meet a carbon neutrality. There are no clear and obvious plans to that. It's been an aspiration. You've mentioned this before, opposite, of course, and we completely approve of such an aspiration. However, to then tarmac again over massive agricultural land is clearly a massive kick towards the opposite direction. We've got a situation where we've planted 100,000 trees or so on, one per resident, which has been done towards these things. And yet, if the residents of this wonderful borough were to try and go out and touch one of these trees, I suspect they would struggle to find, the majority of them, a tree to touch that isn't already being touched by somebody else. As we know, most of these trees are whips and are dead. They don't exist anymore. And many of those trees are actually bushes in the first place. Again, if we are serious in wanting to tackle the environmental situation that we have, if we are serious in wanting to make sure that we have agricultural land that can produce locally grown produce, that do not have to drag from across the country or the rest of the world with all the carbon emissions tied to that, I just do not understand what your point is whatsoever. In addition to this, obviously the buildings in and of themselves have an impact as far as that goes. You've mentioned coking coal mines being reopened in Cumbria of recent, as if suddenly that is an environmental illiterate act of the government. Well, we all know, if you've actually paid attention, that this particular coking coal is something particularly unusual. It is unique to this particular area. The other areas that supply it are in China or America, etc. So we have to import that coal with all the enormous carbon costs of doing so when we could pull it out of our own ground here. We need the coal to make steel. Steel is what windmills are made of. And if we want to build windmills to provide our future proof against using gas, etc., then we are going to need that steel. We're going to need those windmills. So to mockingly suggest that that is an environmentally illiterate decision is either willful ignorance at best, or is purely you've just not researched the problem properly, and I would suggest you possibly go away and do so. I am massively disappointed that you would try and turn this in this direction to say that we are being in any way not considerate of the environment. We absolutely are. I would have hoped that you would have been able to see through that as opposed to trying to score a political point. You haven't, that's fine. There is a clear blue line, and it's obviously also a clear green line between the decisions this party are making and the party opposite are making. I cannot vote for this. I don't think anyone sensible who thought it through could. It's your choice, and of course, my opinion is my opinion, yours is yours. But I will not be voting for this tonight. Thank you.
Does anybody else wish to speak? In which case, if I could invite Councillor Flannery to summate.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, Gareth, I hope you're okay. I noticed you were upset outside, so I'll just hope whatever it is, you're okay. Secondly, I want to, first of all, and not in this order, I want to thank Paul, Mick and Matthew for their passionate response to what they received and heard, which is excellent. So thank you for that. But I just want to go back to Karen, Stephen, Mary and Michael, really, and in some extent you, Gareth, towards the end. Look, the process is the process, Karen. You say you weren't involved. There was colleagues around you who were involved. I'm a very accessible person. Don't try and score any political points. Some of your colleagues were on those meetings. Nothing I have seen, heard, or was done by the consultants and officers was done in any secretive way. For me, in abstract, what I'm hearing is it's the numbers, and it's the carbon zero targets, etc., which we seem to be getting hung up about. Fundamentally, this is about a consultation. This is what happens, and I'll try and explain the best I can. If you go out to consultation with no numbers, you'll get no opinion. If you go out with numbers which are too low, people will say, we need them to be higher. If you go the other way around, they'll go the opposite. See this, what we've done and what I tried to read out before is, we have a basic number, basic requirements. We've then added in the consultants and the whole, and there's been the amount of work being done by those officers and consultants over there has been incredible. They haven't just come up with a number. I can assure you, anything you see in this document is not being done to spite anyone in this room. In this instance, this is for all of us, no matter what our political differences are. This is, you represent your communities. No matter what happens here tonight, as soon as a planning application goes up in anyone's ward, someone will come up and say, I don't want it, and someone will say, I do want it. It happens all the time. But when it comes down to what was said before, unfortunately, yous are all in the same boat as us. 10 years ago, this government had an opportunity to reduce the carbon production in house development by changing the building regulations. They decided not to do it. That's why we're at the situation now where we're trying to achieve this. I can assure you, led by Councillor Martin behind us, this group of people you're looking at here and our colleagues, the Liberal Democrats, all the time it's considered, how can we help the climate? How can we improve our communities? Please don't think it's a slight that these houses, because what's actually being said tonight is you're going to build all these houses, are going to produce all this carbon. Absolutely. But if we had a sustainable policy, we're still going to build them. It's just how we build them and how we insulate them and how we heat them. That's the issue here. In terms of what Mary said, Mary always speaks sensibly in the chamber, and I welcome your comments. But Mary, that'll be dealt with the NPPF, because if someone's building a number of houses, the infrastructure has to come with it, and then the health centres have to come with it. That's how this works. And you know, you're an experienced member on the planning committee, and I agree with what you said, because it's about being inclusive. You're not just going to build what was said tonight is you're going to build houses on the green belt with no infrastructure. That's just not how this happens. And you all know that doesn't happen that way. Michael, you've attended all the meetings, and again, you know, you're a respected guy in the chamber. I know you know your stuff, but you know, and I know the methodology for these numbers has been done in a way which is systematic. It's being intelligent, and it's being considered. They haven't just been put in to make anyone feel uncomfortable. I can assure you, if we could all build houses which are sustainable in areas which need it, which doesn't offend anyone, we would all do it together. Just one final point. If you look at the content page of this document, which I hope you've read, and I know it's a big read, you'll see that all the issues we've just spoke about will be and are going to be addressed in there. So I would urge you, I couldn't tell you what to do, so I wouldn't dream of doing that. I would urge you to reconsider what you've just said, because what's going to happen here is we're going to go out to consultation. We're going to ask people and businesses over the next 10 weeks. If you don't support that fundamentally, I think it's just, I'm not sure how that looks, to be honest, for you guys. And I respect all what you do and what you do for your residents. But what we're asking you to do tonight is to go out to consultation on the information which is provided. The information has been provided in such a way which is being done as fair as possible. So I would urge you to reconsider what you've just said, but I understand and respect it if you don't. But Mayor, I obviously am going to conclude and say the recommendations are there before us, and thank you for hearing me out. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Right, that now takes us to the vote. The recommendations are as set out in the report with the addendum to it. And from what I've heard, I suspect we're not going to get a unanimous decision on this. So what I would like for Christmas is for this voting system to work. And if you could all press for, against, or abstain. Yes, Councillor Green.
Yes.
Will be coming up on the screen and they will be recorded.
Yeah, we should get 30. 16. 35.
I was saying that.
Okay.
That's that 3 times.
You might have unpressed it. It gives you. Okay.
No, there's not any.
Yeah, I think that's it.
Yeah.
I think that's it.
Yeah. No, he speaks in his appointment. Yeah, I think that's it.
Everybody who is here and entitled to vote has done so. That's carried by 19 to 12 with 1 abstention. And at this point, hopefully peace and goodwill to all will break out. If I can wish you all a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and invite you next door for nibbles, drinks, and a farewell to Gary.